October 20th, 2024, the automatic doors at the Bridgehampton Kmart in Long Island, New York, slid shut for the final time. The iconic giant red K was unceremoniously stripped from the facade, leaving a ghost mark on the brick. Inside, the last of the fluorescent lights flickered out over empty, scuffed linoleum aisles. A lone employee turned the key in the lock, officially ending an era on the American mainland. It is difficult to fathom what that turned key truly finalized. Decades ago, this wasn't just a store, it was an American institution. At its zenith, the empire commanded over 2,400 locations and employed more than 350,000 people. It was the undisputed king of discount retail, defining Saturday mornings for millions of families who chased flashing blue police lights through bustling aisles for a fleeting, thrilling bargain. But step into those same parking lots today, and you won't find families or bargains. You will find sprawling, silent husks of concrete, weeds pushing through cracked asphalt, faded red paint peeling from abandoned walls. How does a titan of that magnitude simply vanish? How does a brand that fundamentally shaped modern consumer culture completely evaporate from the landscape? It wasn't just the unstoppable rise of Amazon, and it wasn't merely losing a price war to Walmart. The true autopsy of this fallen giant reveals a far more tragic story. It is a tale of a severe identity crisis, fatal boardroom maneuvers, and a slow, agonizing bleed orchestrated by financial engineers rather than retail visionaries. This is the story of how a pioneer lost its way in the very market it created. The story of America's greatest retail collapse does not begin with empty shelves, barcode scanners, or billionaire hedge fund managers. It begins more than a century earlier, in an era of horse-drawn carriages and cobblestone streets, with a man named Sebastian Sparing Kresge. In 1899, Kresge, a former traveling hardware salesman, invested his life savings to open a modest storefront in downtown Detroit, Michigan. He called it the SS Kresge Company. The concept was elegant in its simplicity and revolutionary in its execution, a five-and-dime store. Everything inside the shop cost either 5 cents or 10 cents. At the dawn of the 20th century, the American working class was expanding rapidly, yet the retail landscape was highly fragmented. Department stores of the era were opulent, intimidating palaces designed primarily for the wealthy, while local general stores often carried limited, overpriced inventory. Kresge democratized consumerism. He offered brightly lit aisles, neat displays, and a staggering variety of everyday household goods at prices the common worker could easily afford. The model was a spectacular success. By 1912, Kresge had incorporated his company with 85 stores generating more than $10 million in annual sales. Throughout the roaring 20s and even during the crushing depths of the Great Depression, the SS Kresge Company continued to expand. It became a fixture of American main streets, recognizable by its red and gold storefronts and the bustling lunch counters that served as community gathering spaces. By the mid-20th century, Kresge was a retail titan, second only to Woolworths in the variety store sector. However, as the 1950s drew to a close, the ground beneath the retail industry began to shift violently. The post-World War II economic boom fundamentally altered the American landscape. Families were fleeing the crowded city centers for the sprawling, newly built suburbs, aided by the rapidly expanding interstate highway system. Simultaneously, post-war inflation made the rigid five-and-dime pricing structure economically unsustainable. The original SS Kresge stores, anchored in declining downtown districts, found themselves physically separated from their migrating customer base and financially squeezed by rising costs. The company was standing at a precipice. The variety store model, the very foundation of their half-century of success, was dying. It is a moment that usually breaks legacy companies, forcing them into a slow, irreversible decline. But the leadership at Kresge made a radical bet-the-company decision. A visionary executive named Harry B. Cunningham, who had started as a stockroom trainee in a Kresge store and risen through the ranks to become president, recognized the shifting tides. He spent 2 years crisscrossing the country, studying the emerging phenomenon of suburban supermarkets and early rudimentary discount retailers. Cunningham realized that the future belonged to scale, massive, freestanding buildings surrounded by acres of free parking, offering a vast array of discounted merchandise under one roof. In 1961, Cunningham convinced the Kresge Board of Directors to abandon their comfort zone and gamble their historic empire on a completely untested concept. They would pivot away from the dying downtown variety stores and pour their vast resources into building colossal, suburban discount centers. They needed a new name for this bold venture, something crisp, modern, and memorable. They took the K from Kresge and added Mart. The stage was set for a retail revolution. The year 1962 is widely considered the Big Bang of modern American retail. In that single transformative year, 3 companies launched their first discount stores. Dayton's opened Target in Minnesota, Sam Walton opened Walmart in Arkansas, and the S.S. Kresge Company opened the very first Kmart in Garden City, Michigan. But while Target and Walmart began as slow, regional experiments, Kmart was a corporate juggernaut from day one. Armed with the immense capital and real estate expertise of the Kresge empire, Kmart did not just enter the market, it detonated within it. On March 1, 1962, when the doors of the Garden City Kmart swung open, an estimated 90,000 people visited the store in its first week alone. The sheer scale of the operation was mesmerizing. Here was a sprawling, well-lit warehouse carrying more than 80,000 different items, from auto parts and sporting goods to apparel and cosmetics, all priced aggressively below traditional department store margins. The success was so immediate and overwhelming that Kresge's leadership launched into an unprecedented expansion campaign. By the end of 1962, there were 18 Kmart stores. By 1966, there were 162. But scale alone did not make Kmart a cultural icon. That required something more visceral, a gimmick that would fundamentally alter the psychology of the American shopper. In 1965, an assistant store manager named Earl Lytle in Fort Wayne, Indiana, noticed that certain items were overstocked and taking up valuable floor space. Needing to clear the merchandise quickly, he took a rotating police beacon, mounted it on a piece of wood, wheeled it over to the stagnant inventory, and plugged it in. The store announcer grabbed the microphone and uttered a phrase that would soon become embedded in the national lexicon. Attention, Kmart shoppers. The Blue Light Special was born. For 15 thrilling minutes, whatever sat beneath that flashing blue siren was heavily discounted. It was a masterpiece of manufactured urgency and gamified consumerism. Shoppers would literally abandon their half-full carts in the apparel section and sprint toward the hardware department just to see what the blue light was offering. It transformed a mundane Saturday morning errand into an unpredictable treasure hunt. The Blue Light Special was so successful that it became a mandatory daily event across the entire chain, cementing Kmart not just as a store, but as an experience. You didn't just shop at Kmart, you participated in it. By the 1980s and early 1990s, Kmart had ascended to the absolute pinnacle of the retail mountain. The S.S. Kresge name was officially retired. The corporation was now simply Kmart. The statistics from this golden era are almost difficult to comprehend by modern standards. At its peak, the empire commanded over 2,400 stores across the United States. It employed more than 350,000 people. It generated a staggering $37 billion in annual sales. Kmart became the undisputed center of American working-class consumerism. It was the place where parents put Christmas presents on layaway, paying them off dollar by dollar over months. It was the place where families grabbed a slice of pizza or a submarine sandwich at the in-store K-Cafe before filling their trunks with toilet paper and motor oil. Furthermore, Kmart pioneered the concept of celebrity retail partnerships long before it became an industry standard. In 1985, they launched a clothing line with Charlie's Angels star Jaclyn Smith, proving that discount apparel did not have to mean sacrificing style. A decade later, they struck gold again by partnering with Martha Stewart, bringing an aspirational, middle-class aesthetic to suburban dining tables at a fraction of department store prices. Kmart was everywhere, doing everything for everyone. Yet hidden beneath the billions in revenue and the blinding flash of the blue light, a fatal hubris was taking root in the corporate boardroom in Troy, Michigan. Success breeds complacency, and Kmart's executives had become convinced of their own invincibility. Because they were generating so much cash, they began diverting focus away from their core discount stores. They went on a bizarre spending spree, acquiring a chaotic portfolio of specialty chains, Walden Books, Borders, Builders Square, and Sports Authority. While executive attention was fractured by these side ventures, the actual Kmart stores were beginning to quietly rot from the inside. Veteran store managers pleaded for funds to remodel aging locations, replace flickering fluorescent lights, and fix peeling linoleum floors, but their requests were repeatedly denied. The stores were becoming notoriously cluttered and difficult to navigate. Worse still, Kmart's leadership was entirely dismissive of a competitor down in Bentonville, Arkansas. While Kmart was resting on its cultural laurels, Walmart was ruthlessly investing billions of dollars into a computerized logistics network, barcode scanning, and satellite communication to build the most efficient supply chain in human history. Kmart was fighting a war of nostalgia. Walmart was building a Death Star. The peak of the mountain is a dangerous place to stand because the only direction left to go is down, and Kmart was about to take a devastating fall. As the calendar turned from the 1980s into the 1990s, the American retail landscape began to violently polarize. The market was no longer simply about having the biggest box on the block. It was about holding a distinct, unshakable position in the consumer's mind. And it was here, in the ruthless battle for psychological real estate, that Kmart suffered its first fatal, invisible wound. It suffered a total collapse of identity. To understand Kmart's existential crisis, one must look at the two retail titans flanking it. On one side stood Walmart. Based in rural Arkansas, Walmart had built a relentless, mathematically precise empire entirely around the promise of everyday low prices. They did not need flashy sales, gimmicks, or celebrity endorsements because their operational efficiency allowed them to undercut competitors on toothpaste, detergent, and blue jeans every single day of the year. On the other side stood Target. Originally launched in the exact same year as Kmart, Target had strategically carved out a niche as the upscale discounter. It offered slightly higher quality apparel, trendy home goods, and brighter, immaculately clean aisles. Consumers affectionately began pronouncing its name with a faux French accent, Target. It was cheap, but it felt chic. It offered an aspirational aesthetic to the middle class. Kmart found itself trapped in the treacherous, shrinking middle. It was no longer the cheapest, and it was certainly not the most stylish. When a shopper needed bare-bones necessities at the absolute lowest cost, they drove to Walmart. When they wanted affordable fashion or a pleasant afternoon browsing for decorative pillows, they drove to Target. So when did they drive to Kmart? Increasingly, the answer was, only when there was a massive sale. This lack of a clear, defining purpose induced a state of panic within the corporate boardroom in Troy, Michigan. Rather than fundamentally restructuring their business model or investing the necessary billions to overhaul their aging, cluttered store base, Kmart's leadership attempted to market their way out of a structural deficit. They believed that if they simply shouted louder, consumers would return. Throughout the 1990s, the company poured staggering sums of money into high-profile advertising campaigns. They hired beloved television personalities like Rosie O'Donnell and Penny Marshall to banter playfully in commercials, hoping to project an image of a fun, accessible neighborhood store. They plastered Sunday newspapers with massive, color-saturated circulars advertising blowout sales, attempting to artificially recreate the urgency of the old blue light specials. But advertising can only make a promise. The physical store must keep it. And this is where the disconnect became fatal. A consumer might see a charming television spot featuring a smiling celebrity, but when they pulled into the Kmart parking lot, the reality was starkly different. The asphalt was often cracked. The fluorescent lighting inside was frequently dim or flickering, casting a pallid hue over the merchandise. The aisles were famously disorganized, with clearance racks shoved into corners and mismatched inventory spilling off shelves. The executives were essentially putting a fresh coat of paint on a house with a crumbling foundation. They were spending millions on the illusion of vitality while ignoring the operational rot spreading through the floorboards. Kmart was trying to be all things to all people, a low-price leader, a fashion destination, a neighborhood pharmacy, and a grocery store all at once. By refusing to commit to a singular dominant identity, the brand became a watered-down version of its competitors. In a desperate bid to reinvent themselves in 1997, the company launched the Big Kmart initiative. It was a massive, expensive rebranding effort designed to convince the public that the chain was modernizing. Hundreds of stores were retrofitted with new signage, slightly wider aisles, and an expanded pantry section. But Big Kmart was largely a superficial facelift. It did not fix the underlying operational issues, nor did it change the fundamental quality of the merchandise. Customers saw through the veneer almost immediately. The new signs gleamed, but the shelves beneath them remained plagued by the same old problems. This identity crisis also manifested in a baffling merchandising strategy. Kmart continued to rely heavily on high-low pricing. They would mark items up, only to aggressively slash the prices in weekly circulars to drive foot traffic. This strategy inadvertently trained their remaining customers to become ruthless cherry pickers. Shoppers would come in solely to buy the heavily discounted loss leaders, items sold at or below cost just to get people in the door, and then leave without purchasing the higher margin items that actually generated profit. The stores felt busy, but the business was bleeding cash. As the decade progressed, the cultural perception of the brand began to curdle. Shopping at Kmart was no longer a weekend event. It was becoming a punchline. The once beloved institution was gradually acquiring a reputation as the store of last resort. The iconic red K no longer signaled a treasure hunt, it signaled a compromise. Inside the corporate headquarters, a revolving door of executives tried to steer the ship, but none of them seemed to understand that the American consumer had already moved on. The middle ground in retail is a graveyard, and Kmart had unknowingly begun to dig its own plot. While the marketing department in Troy, Michigan, was desperately trying to buy a new identity with expensive television campaigns and celebrity endorsements, a far more lethal cancer was metastasizing in the back rooms and distribution centers of the Kmart empire. To understand the true mechanics of Kmart's downfall, one must look away from the flashing blue lights and examine the unglamorous, invisible backbone of any retail operation, the supply chain. In this arena, Kmart did not just lose a competitive battle, it suffered an absolute systemic collapse. During the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s, the science of retail logistics underwent a violent, high-tech revolution. Down in Bentonville, Arkansas, Walmart was not just building retail stores, they were constructing a highly advanced, data-driven nervous system. Walmart invested billions of dollars into proprietary barcode scanning technology, computerized inventory tracking systems, and even their own private satellite network to link stores directly to headquarters and suppliers. When a customer bought a tube of toothpaste at a Walmart in Ohio, that data was instantly beamed to Bentonville, which then automatically triggered a reorder from the manufacturer and routed the replacement seamlessly through a highly efficient distribution hub. Kmart, blinded by its past success and burdened by its massive aging infrastructure, fundamentally ignored this technological arms race until it was too late. For years, veteran store managers were still ordering merchandise using paper forms, manual inventory counts, and thick printed catalogs. Headquarters had almost no real-time visibility into what was actually selling on the floor of any given store. The company operated on a rudimentary push system rather than a modern pull system. Instead of restocking exactly what customers were buying based on live data, corporate buyers would purchase massive quantities of goods, often to secure bulk manufacturer discounts, and simply push them out to the stores, completely disregarding local demand or seasonal variations. The result was a catastrophic mismatch of inventory that crippled the company's cash flow. A Kmart store in sunny Florida might inexplicably receive a massive surplus of heavy winter snow shovels, while a store in Minnesota ran out of them by November. The distribution centers and store backrooms became bloated with dead, unsellable merchandise, while high-demand items were constantly depleted. Headquarters was flying completely blind, relying on executive intuition and outdated historical data in an era where their main competitor was operating with mathematical, real-time precision. When Kmart finally attempted a multi-billion-dollar IT overhaul in the late 1990s to catch up, the implementation was disastrous. The new software frequently crashed, old databases were incompatible, and the logistics network remained fundamentally broken. This invisible, corporate-level technological failure quickly manifested into a highly visible, incredibly frustrating physical reality for the everyday shopper. The supply chain nightmare bled directly onto the sales floor, systematically destroying the most critical asset any retailer possesses: consumer trust. Because the backrooms of Kmart stores were choked to the ceiling with unsold, out-of-season merchandise, incoming shipments of new products literally had nowhere to go. Store employees, who were increasingly understaffed due to corporate budget cuts, were forced to leave massive, shrink-wrapped pallets of unopened boxes sitting directly in the shopping aisles. Navigating a Kmart store transitioned from a weekend leisure activity into a frustrating obstacle course. Shoppers had to weave their metal carts around towering stacks of cardboard, squeezing through narrow, disorganized pathways that felt claustrophobic and chaotic. But the ultimate betrayal occurred when customers actually tried to buy what Kmart was advertising. The company continued to pump out millions of colorful Sunday newspaper circulars, promising deep, attractive discounts on specific household items to drive foot traffic. Families would meticulously plan their shopping trips around these advertised sales. However, because of the fractured supply chain, when they arrived at the store, they were routinely met with empty shelves. The phrase "out of stock" became practically synonymous with the Kmart shopping experience. To appease understandably angry customers, frontline cashiers were forced to issue millions of rain checks, slips of paper promising the customer the sale price whenever the item finally returned to the shelf. But the items rarely came back in time. A mother looking for a specific, heavily advertised toy for her child's birthday could not wait 3 weeks for a supply chain correction. She needed it that day. Frontline employees bore the brunt of this logistical failure, facing daily verbal abuse from frustrated shoppers while lacking the tools or inventory to solve the problem. Morale plummeted, which further degraded the level of customer service. This continuous cycle of broken promises fundamentally altered American consumer behavior. The unwritten contract of retail is built on basic reliability. If a customer drives out of their way to visit a store, walks past the peeling exterior paint, navigates through cluttered aisles, and leaves empty-handed twice, they will simply not return a third time. The initial frustration slowly mutated into cold apathy. The sticky, scuffed linoleum floors, the flickering fluorescent lights casting a yellow pallor over mismatched shelving, and the aisles blocked by freight were no longer just signs of an aging department store. They were the visible symptoms of a dying machine. Customers began to realize that the iconic blue light wasn't just fading, it was illuminating a broken promise. And quietly, without a dramatic exit, millions of Americans simply started driving past Kmart to park in the brightly lit, fully stocked lots of Target and Walmart. By the dawn of the 21st century, the bill for a decade of strategic missteps and logistical failures finally came due. The fractured supply chain, the confused brand identity, and the heavy reliance on unprofitable promotional sales had severely drained Kmart's cash reserves. Wall Street analysts, once bullish on the retail giant, began issuing dire, flashing warnings. The holiday shopping season of 2001, traditionally the lifeblood of any retailer's fiscal year, proved to be an unmitigated disaster for the big Kmart brand. While consumers flocked to Target for affordable style and to Walmart for undisputed low prices, Kmart's notoriously cluttered, dimly lit aisles remained eerily quiet. The company missed its sales targets by a catastrophic margin. The fatal blow, however, came not directly from a competitor, but from a panicked supplier. In early 2002, Fleming Companies, Kmart's sole distributor of food and consumable goods, abruptly suspended all shipments after the retailer failed to make a routine $78 million weekly payment. In the tightly wound ecosystem of commercial retail, this was the equivalent of a sudden cardiac arrest. When a major supplier loses faith and demands cash up front, it sends a terrifying signal to the rest of the market. Rumors of impending insolvency triggered a massive, frantic sell-off of Kmart stock on Wall Street, sending shares plummeting to historic lows in a matter of days. The company's credit rating was instantly downgraded to junk status, effectively cutting off its access to the capital needed to keep the lights on and the shelves stocked. On the freezing morning of January 22, 2002, the unthinkable became a stark legal reality. Kmart Corporation officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in a Chicago federal court. At the time, it was the largest retail bankruptcy in United States history, dwarfing all previous industry failures. The sheer scale of the collapse sent shockwaves through the American public. An empire that had once commanded the suburbs, an institution so deeply embedded in the national consciousness that, attention Kmart shoppers, was a universally understood cultural punchline, was now pleading with a federal judge for protection from an army of angry creditors. Bankruptcy protection provides a desperate corporation with breathing room, but it demands a heavy pound of flesh in return. The restructuring process was swift, clinical, and brutal. Within months of the filing, Kmart leadership announced the permanent closure of nearly 600 underperforming stores across the country. The physical dismantling of the American retail landscape had officially begun. Professional liquidators descended upon communities from coast to coast. Massive, garish yellow and black, store closing, and everything must go banners were hastily draped over the familiar red brick facades. Inside, the atmosphere was funereal. The already disorganized aisles devolved into complete chaos as scavengers picked through deeply discounted, leftover merchandise. This was not merely a corporate financial restructuring, it was a localized economic tragedy played out hundreds of times over. Nearly 60,000 employees, many of whom had spent their entire adult lives working under the blue light, were abruptly handed pink slips. Cashiers who knew their regular neighborhood customers by name were suddenly tasked with dismantling the very steel shelving units they had meticulously stocked for decades. For the towns and neighborhoods losing their local Kmart, especially in rural areas or underserved urban centers, it meant the devastating loss of an anchor tenant, a community pharmacy, and a reliable, walkable source of affordable daily necessities. Inside the corporate headquarters in Troy, a revolving door of crisis managers, lawyers, and restructuring experts desperately attempted to stop the bleeding. The narrative presented to the frightened public and the demoralized remaining workforce was one of painful but necessary rebirth. Chapter 11 was pitched as a reset button, a vital legal mechanism to shed unprofitable legacy real estate leases, discharge insurmountable debt, and allow a leaner, more focused and aggressive Kmart to emerge from the ashes. And for a brief fleeting moment in May 2003, when the company officially exited bankruptcy court, it seemed as though the traumatic corporate surgery might have been successful. Kmart was alive, its balance sheet was suddenly clean, and it still possessed a massive footprint of over 1,500 stores. However, the vulnerability of bankruptcy had fundamentally altered Kmart's DNA. By filing for Chapter 11, the company's leadership had inadvertently opened the city gates to an entirely different breed of corporate predator. Kmart's vastly depreciated stock and distressed debt had become incredibly attractive to Wall Street speculators who cared nothing for retail history. The executives desperately trying to save the stores failed to realize that the company was no longer being evaluated on its ability to sell apparel, electronics, or garden supplies. It was being ruthlessly evaluated on the underlying, hidden value of its real estate portfolio. The stage was set not for a triumphant retail renaissance, but for a calculated financial takeover that would seal the empire's ultimate doom. When a massive retail corporation emerges from the wreckage of Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the traditional path forward involves a renewed focus on core operations. A modernized brand strategy, an overhauled supply chain, and a renewed commitment to customer experience are typically the remedies prescribed to heal the wounded enterprise. But when Kmart exited bankruptcy court in May 2003, it did not follow the traditional retail playbook. Instead, it became the subject of an unprecedented financial experiment, orchestrated by a man who had never managed a retail store, stocked a shelf, or negotiated a vendor contract. Enter Edward Lampert, a brilliant, fiercely private billionaire, and the manager of a Connecticut-based hedge fund called ESL Investments. While Kmart was bleeding cash and closing hundreds of locations in 2002, Lampert had quietly and methodically begun purchasing the company's deeply discounted debt. Wall Street viewed the bonds as toxic paper, but Lampert saw a hidden, vastly undervalued asset. Kmart still controlled the long-term leases on over 1,000 prime real estate locations across the United States. Many of these leases had been signed decades earlier, locking the company into rental rates that were astronomically below current market value. Through his aggressive acquisition of debt, Lampert positioned his hedge fund as Kmart's largest creditor. When the company reorganized, that debt was converted into equity, granting Lampert absolute control over the Kmart board of directors and the entire corporate entity. He was instantly hailed by the financial press as a visionary, the next Warren Buffett. And for a brief, intoxicating period, the numbers seemed to validate the praise. Within a year of exiting bankruptcy, Kmart's stock price, which had been virtually worthless, skyrocketed. However, this explosive financial turnaround was a magnificent illusion. The soaring stock price was not the result of Kmart suddenly selling more apparel, electronics, or home goods. It was not driven by a return of the loyal, weekend shoppers. Instead, it was driven by pure, ruthless financial engineering. Lampert's strategy fundamentally shifted the company's purpose. Kmart was no longer operating primarily as a retailer. It was operating as a massive real estate portfolio. To generate immediate cash and drive up the share price, Lampert began selling off the leases of the most profitable, highly trafficked Kmart locations to competitors like Home Depot and Sears. He was effectively cannibalizing the healthiest parts of the retail network to feed the balance sheet. Simultaneously, Lampert instituted a regime of extreme, draconian cost-cutting across the remaining stores. In the retail industry, capital expenditures, the money spent on maintaining and upgrading physical locations, are the lifeblood of a brand's image. A retailer must constantly invest in fresh paint, bright lighting, clean floors, and modern fixtures to keep the shopping environment inviting. Lampert practically eliminated capital expenditures overnight. He argued that investing money into store aesthetics was a poor return on capital, preferring to hoard the cash or use it for stock buybacks. The physical consequences of this financial philosophy were devastating. Almost immediately, the remaining Kmart stores began a rapid, visible descent into decay. Roofs that leaked during heavy rainstorms were left unrepaired, forcing employees to place plastic buckets in the middle of shopping aisles. The iconic neon signage on the exterior of the buildings began to burn out, leaving gaping, dark letters on the storefronts. Inside, the stores took on a grim, depressing atmosphere. Cleaning crews were downsized or eliminated entirely, leaving floors permanently scuffed and sticky. Heating and air conditioning units were poorly maintained, making the stores uncomfortably hot in the summer and freezing in the winter. Perhaps the most damaging cut was to the frontline workforce. Payroll budgets were slashed to the bone. Massive 100,000 square foot stores were often staffed by only a handful of employees. Customers who managed to find the items they wanted, a difficult task given the continued supply chain issues, were frequently forced to wait in agonizingly long lines, as only 1 or 2 checkout lanes out of a dozen were ever open. The dressing rooms were unmonitored and chaotic, and finding an associate on the sales floor to answer a question became an exercise in futility. The tragedy of this era was the profound disconnect between the boardroom and the checkout lane. On Wall Street, ESL Investments was reporting massive profits, and Lampert was celebrated as a financial genius who had resurrected a dead brand. But on Main Street, the brand was rotting from the inside out. Customers felt actively disrespected by the conditions of the stores. The nostalgic affection that millions of Americans still harbored for the Kmart of their childhood was rapidly being replaced by a sense of pity and eventually disgust. Lampert was attempting to run a retail empire entirely through the lens of a spreadsheet, ignoring the fundamental truth that retail is a profoundly human, physical experience. You cannot spreadsheet your way to a clean restroom, and you cannot buy consumer loyalty with stock buybacks. By starving the physical stores of basic resources, the hedge fund takeover did not save Kmart. It simply placed the company on artificial life support, extracting every last ounce of equity before the inevitable end. And the most baffling, destructive maneuver was still yet to come. In late 2004, the retail world was caught completely off guard by an announcement that seemed to defy the fundamental laws of corporate physics. Kmart, a company that had just narrowly escaped the jaws of the largest retail bankruptcy in history, was buying an American icon. Edward Lampert engineered an $11 billion deal for Kmart to acquire Sears, Roebuck and Company, merging the two legacy brands into a new colossal entity named Sears Holdings Corporation. On paper, the merger was pitched to investors and the public as a brilliant, transformative masterstroke. By combining the massive suburban footprint of Kmart with the anchor mall dominance of Sears, Lampert promised to create the third largest retailer in the United States, boasting nearly 3,500 stores and $35 billion in annual revenue. The corporate narrative was built on the tantalizing concept of synergy. Kmart would finally have access to Sears' highly coveted proprietary brands, like Kenmore appliances, Craftsman tools, and Die-Hard batteries. In return, Sears could theoretically expand its footprint away from the declining indoor mall sector by utilizing Kmart's freestanding, easily accessible neighborhood locations. Together, they would finally have the scale, the purchasing power, and the geographic reach to wage a two-front war against Walmart and Home Depot. However, veteran retail analysts quickly pointed out the fatal flaw in this grand design. Merging two fundamentally failing companies does not magically create one successful one. Instead of creating a modern retail superpower, the merger effectively tied two rapidly sinking ships together, guaranteeing that they would drag each other to the bottom of the ocean. The most destructive element of the Sears Holdings era was not just the incompatible real estate portfolios or the aging store infrastructures. It was the psychological warfare unleashed within the corporate headquarters. Lampert, operating almost entirely from his hedge fund offices in Greenwich, Connecticut, rarely set foot in the physical stores he owned. He viewed the business not as an organic, collaborative enterprise rooted in local communities, but as an intellectual exercise in free market economics. Deeply influenced by objectivist philosophy, Lampert believed that extreme internal competition would naturally produce the most efficient and profitable outcomes. Consequently, he shattered the traditional, unified corporate structure of Sears Holdings, dividing the company into more than 30 autonomous business units. There was a distinct unit for appliances, a unit for apparel, a unit for human resources, and a unit for information technology. He then mandated that these divisions operate as independent companies and aggressively compete against one another for corporate resources and budget allocations. The result was a catastrophic breakdown of basic corporate function. The internal environment quickly devolved into what frustrated executives privately referred to as a corporate Hunger Games. Rather than collaborating to defeat Walmart or Target, the leaders of the various business units began actively sabotaging each other. If the apparel division wanted to promote a new line of Kmart clothing in the weekly circular, they had to literally pay the marketing division out of their own budget to secure the space. If a Kmart store needed its broken inventory software fixed, the store manager had to negotiate a financial contract with the internal IT division. This hyper-competitive structure paralyzed the company. Divisions flatly refused to share crucial customer data with one another. Department heads would fight bitterly in board meetings over floor space, squabbling over whether a Kmart aisle should feature a Sears Craftsman tool display or a seasonal clothing rack. No one was looking at the holistic customer experience because executive bonuses were tied strictly to the profitability of their individual silos. The culture clash bled directly onto the sales floor, creating profound consumer confusion. In a doomed experiment dubbed Sears Essentials, the company attempted to retrofit Kmart locations with Sears signage while keeping Kmart's discount merchandise inside. Customers expecting the high-end appliances of a Sears department store walked in to find cheap plastic toys and discounted laundry detergent. Conversely, loyal Kmart shoppers felt alienated by the sudden presence of high-ticket lawn tractors in aisles where they used to buy basic groceries. The Kmart shopper was simply not the Sears shopper, and the forced marriage pleased neither demographic. To mask the accelerating decline of the physical stores, Lampert heavily pushed a complex loyalty rewards program called Shop Your Way. He believed he could replace the need for physical store improvements with a data-mining digital ecosystem. Chronically understaffed Kmart cashiers were heavily pressured to aggressively pitch this confusing point system to every single customer. This mandate slowed the checkout process to an agonizing crawl. Elderly shoppers trying to buy a gallon of milk were suddenly trapped in long, frustrating lines while cashiers tried to explain digital coupons. While executives engaged in this toxic internal trench warfare, The physical Kmart stores were completely abandoned to the elements. The draconian cost-cutting initiated after the bankruptcy only accelerated. The floors remained sticky. The lighting remained dim. Potholes in the parking lots grew into craters. As the 2000s bled into the 2010s, the illusion of the Sears merger completely evaporated. While Kmart and Sears spent their energy fighting each other for scraps of internal funding, the rest of the retail world accelerated into the future. By creating Sears Holdings, the architects of Kmart's fate did not buy the company a new lease on life. They merely constructed a larger, more complicated tomb. As the 2010s progressed, Kmart ceased to be a functioning retail entity in the traditional sense and morphed into something profoundly eerie. To walk into a Kmart during this decade was to step back in time, but into a timeline where everything had gone terribly wrong. The internet had coined a term for places like this: liminal spaces, transitional abandoned areas that evoke a sense of unease and a distorted melancholy nostalgia. Kmart had become the ultimate physical manifestation of a liminal space in American consumer culture. The stores that remained open were, for all intents and purposes, ghost towns. The once bustling aisles where the blue light had flashed with thrilling unpredictability were now cavernous, silent, and cast in the sickly yellow hue of failing fluorescent tubes. Because the fractured supply chain could no longer procure fresh merchandise, whole sections of the massive retail floors were simply barricaded off. Employees used caution tape, yellow plastic chains, or walls of empty cardboard boxes to block access to the back halves of the buildings. Customers who ventured in for a quick gallon of milk or a heavily discounted greeting card would find rows of empty metal shelving, accumulating thick layers of dust. The iconic K Cafe, once filled with the comforting smells of popcorn and hot dogs, sat dark and abandoned. The neon signs permanently unplugged and the countertops stripped bare. The primary business model of Kmart during this era seemed to be the perpetual act of going out of business. Every few months, Sears Holdings would announce a new devastating wave of closures. For hundreds of communities across the United States, their final interaction with the Kmart brand was not a normal shopping trip, but a grim participation in a liquidation sale. Professional liquidators, third-party firms hired to squeeze the last possible pennies out of a dying storefront, would take over the building. They hung massive, jarring yellow and black banners across the fading red brick facades. Store closing, nothing held back, fixtures for sale. Inside, the atmosphere was chaotic and deeply depressing. The remaining merchandise was consolidated to the front of the store, while the back descended into total darkness. Even the physical infrastructure of the store was slapped with fluorescent price tags. Customers could literally buy the metal checkout counters, the clothing racks, the shopping carts, and even the employee break room microwave. It was the complete structural dismantling of a local institution, sold off piece by piece to bargain hunters and scrap collectors. The human cost of this slow bleed was agonizing. Thousands of long-term employees, people who had spent decades building relationships with their communities under the blue light, were forced to become morticians for their own stores. They spent their final weeks sweeping floors that would never be cleaned again, boxing up unsold, obsolete inventory, and saying goodbye to elderly regulars who had treated the local Kmart as a daily social outing. There was no grand turnaround strategy communicated to the frontline workers, no infusion of fresh inventory, and no hope for a rescue. There was only the dreadful, lingering anticipation of waiting to see if their specific location would be named on the next quarterly list of casualties, while local store managers and skeleton crew cashiers were left to deal with the humiliating reality of leaking roofs, broken heating systems, and angry customers. The corporate leadership remained completely detached. Operating from afar, Edward Lampert continued to spin a narrative of a digital transformation. He insisted that Sears Holdings was simply transitioning to an asset-light model, a sanitized corporate euphemism for liquidating everything of physical value to pay off mounting debts. But the inevitable mathematics of this strategy finally caught up with the illusion in the fall of 2018. Despite years of selling off prime real estate, spinning off valuable proprietary brands like Craftsman tools, and closing thousands of stores, the company was hemorrhaging cash at an unsustainable rate. The financial engineering had run out of runway. On October 15, 2018, Sears Holdings Corporation officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This was not the strategic, optimistic restructuring bankruptcy that Kmart had undergone in 2002. This was the final gasp of a dying animal. The corporate entity that had housed two of the greatest names in American retail history had collapsed under its own debt. In a controversial twist that stunned the retail world and infuriated creditors, the man who had overseen the catastrophic decline of the company positioned himself as its ultimate savior. Through his hedge fund, Lampert formed a new entity called Transformco and purchased the remaining assets of Sears Holdings out of bankruptcy court in early 2019. He publicly argued that saving the company would preserve tens of thousands of jobs. But the reality on the ground told a vastly different story. Transformco did not stop the bleeding, it merely changed the name on the bandage. The post-bankruptcy strategy was identical to the pre-bankruptcy strategy: continue liquidating the remaining physical stores to extract the last drops of real estate value. The zombie march continued, but the herd was thinning rapidly. The empire was officially gone. All that remained were a few scattered stragglers, waiting in the dark for the final lights to be turned off. By the dawn of the 2020s, tracking the remaining Kmart locations across the United States had become an exercise in retail archaeology. The corporate website's store locator was a ghost town of broken links and vanished addresses. For the general public, the brand had already passed into the realm of nostalgia, a memory from a bygone era. Yet stubbornly, a microscopic fraction of the empire clung to life. These were not the vibrant, bustling centers of commerce from the 1980s. They were surreal, isolated outposts operating entirely on borrowed time. Visiting one of these final locations was a profoundly melancholic experience. The sheer size of the buildings, often exceeding 90,000 square feet, made the lack of inventory in customers feel oppressive. Shoppers would walk through vast, echoing chambers of empty linoleum. The few remaining aisles were stocked sparsely, often with generic, unbranded merchandise, random assortments of off-brand laundry detergent, or a handful of out-of-season clothing items scattered across mismatched racks. The pharmacy counters, once the vital heartbeat of these neighborhood stores, had long been shuttered, their metal security grates pulled down and padlocked. The employees who staffed these final desolate locations were a unique breed of retail survivor. Many were veterans with 20 or 30 years of tenure. They had worn the iconic red vests during the golden age of the blue light specials, had navigated the chaotic years of the Sears merger, and now found themselves overseeing the silent, agonizing conclusion of their life's work. They spent their shifts essentially maintaining a museum, sweeping floors for crowds that would never arrive, and answering the same bewildered question from the occasional wandering tourist. I didn't know Kmart was still open. As 2023 bled into 2024, the slow trickle of closures accelerated toward an absolute zero. The massive, sprawling footprint that had once blanketed the American suburbs had evaporated. In the spring of 2024, a store in Avenel, New Jersey, quietly locked its doors. Months later, another location fell. Suddenly, the retail world realized a historic threshold was about to be crossed. On the entirety of the continental United States, only one full-size, traditional Kmart remained. In a twist of profound geographic irony, the final bastion of America's greatest working-class discount empire was located in one of the wealthiest zip codes in the country, Bridgehampton, New York, in the heart of Long Island's elite Hamptons. For 25 years, the Bridgehampton Kmart had served as a crucial, affordable lifeline for the year-round working-class residents and seasonal laborers who serviced the surrounding mansions and manicured estates. But the lease was finally expiring, and the real estate was simply too valuable to house a dying discount brand. The announcement was made in late summer. The Bridgehampton Kmart would permanently close its doors in October 2024. The final countdown had begun. The last days of the Bridgehampton store played out like a slow-motion funeral. As October approached, the professional liquidators arrived, hanging the familiar garish yellow and black "Everything must go" banners across the brick facade. But unlike the frenzied liquidations of the early 2000s, there was little left to sell. The inventory quickly dwindled to bizarre, disconnected remnants. A few bottles of motor oil, some discounted Halloween decorations, and scattered solitary shoes. The true commodity being consumed in those final weeks was nostalgia. People drove from hours away, from Brooklyn, from Connecticut, from New Jersey, not to buy anything, but simply to walk the aisles one last time. They took photographs of the fading red signage, the scuffed floors and the empty shelves. For an entire generation of Americans, this physical space represented their childhoods, their Saturday morning routines, and a simpler era of consumerism. They were coming to pay their respects to an institution that had shaped their lives. Sunday, October 20th, 2024, marked the official end. Inside the cavernous building, the atmosphere was incredibly subdued. The remaining employees, some holding back tears, meticulously packed away the final boxes of unsold freight. The rhythmic electronic beeps of the barcode scanners, a sound that had echoed across thousands of stores for decades, finally fell silent. The most symbolic and gut-wrenching moment occurred not inside the store, but out in the parking lot. A bucket truck pulled up to the main facade. Workers ascended to the giant illuminated red K and the teal Mart lettering that had defined the building for a quarter century. One by one, the bolts were loosened. The massive plastic letters were pried away from the brick, lowered to the asphalt, and loaded into the back of a waiting truck. When they drove away, all that remained was a pale, unweathered ghost outline on the masonry, a permanent scar indicating what used to be there. At exactly 9 p.m., the manager walked to the front entrance, pushed the heavy glass doors together, and turned the key in the deadbolt. The fluorescent lights inside were killed, plunging the 90,000 square foot space into total darkness. On the mainland of the United States, the Kmart empire was officially extinguished. It must be noted that the brand's name did not entirely vanish from the earth on that October night, though its existence became a bizarre footnote. A tiny, severely downsized location, resembling a cramped convenience store more than a department store, inexplicably remained open in Kendall, Florida. Furthermore, thousands of miles away in the Pacific, a massive Kmart in Guam continued to thrive, insulated from the mainland collapse by a unique island supply chain, dynamics, and a steady stream of tourists. But these anomalies were the retail equivalent of a severed tail twitching after the animal had expired. The Kmart that America knew, the cultural juggernaut of the blue light special, the sprawling suburban anchor, the corporate titan that once employed hundreds of thousands of people, died when the lights went out in Bridgehampton. The decades-long hemorrhage had finally stopped, leaving behind nothing but empty asphalt and fading memories. When an empire falls, it leaves ruins behind. Across the United States, the physical corpse of the Kmart Corporation is still highly visible. It is impossible to simply erase over 2,000 massive concrete boxes from the American landscape overnight. Today, the afterlife of a former Kmart store takes one of a few distinct, often deeply ironic forms. Many of these sprawling, 90,000 square foot buildings have been absorbed by the very forces that helped destroy the brand. In a twist of dark retail poetry, several former Kmarts have been gutted, stripped of their red and teal floor tiles, and retrofitted into local fulfillment centers for Amazon. Where families once browsed the aisles for Sunday bargains, logistics algorithms now direct warehouse workers packing cardboard boxes for next-day delivery. Other locations have been partitioned into climate-controlled U-Haul storage facilities, silently holding the excess belongings of a consumer culture that Kmart helped pioneer. Some have found second lives as vast indoor trampoline parks, mega gyms, or even expansive local churches. Yet hundreds of others simply sit empty. They are architectural ghosts anchoring dying strip malls. The asphalt in their vast parking lots resembles shattered glass, violently overgrown with weeds. The faded rectangular outlines where the giant red letters once hung remain permanently seared into the brick facades. They stand as silent, decaying monuments to a bygone era of American commerce, haunting the sprawling suburbs they once so proudly dominated. But the true legacy of Kmart extends far beyond abandoned real estate and broken supply chains. To simply write off the company as a spectacular business failure, a victim of hedge fund mismanagement and a catastrophic loss of identity, is to ignore its profound cultural footprint. Before Walmart perfected the logistics algorithm and before Target defined affordable chic, Kmart taught modern America how to shop. Sebastian Kresge's original vision and Harry Cunningham's bold pivot in 1962 fundamentally democratized consumerism. They proved that working-class families deserve bright, clean, well-stocked stores offering an incredible variety of goods under one roof. The Blue Light Special was never just a clearance tactic, it was a unifying, nationwide cultural experience. It turned the mundane chore of buying household necessities into a communal treasure hunt. It created a shared, undeniable language for millions of Americans who grew up anticipating the spinning siren and the crackling public address announcement. The intense nostalgia that continues to surround the death of Kmart is rarely about the corporation itself. Very few people mourn the boardroom executives in Troy, Michigan, or the billionaire hedge fund investors in Connecticut who ultimately drained the company's lifeblood. Instead, the collective mourning is intimately personal. When generations of Americans look at those empty husks of concrete, they are grieving the relentless passage of time. They are remembering crisp autumn mornings, walking through the automatic sliding doors, holding their parents' hands. They are remembering the comforting, artificial smell of popcorn and ICEs from the K-Cafe. They are remembering the quiet dignity of the layaway counter, where working parents slowly paid off a bicycle or a winter coat just in time for Christmas morning. Kmart did not merely sell discounted merchandise. For 4 decades, it served as a reliable, accessible backdrop for the American dream. It built the foundation of the modern discount industry, paved the roads for its greatest, most ruthless rivals, and eventually lost its way in the very wilderness it created. The flashing blue light has finally faded to black, but the shadow it cast over American consumer culture will linger for generations. The story of Kmart is not merely a post-mortem of a failed business. It is a profound reflection on the volatility of the American dream. It serves as a stark, cautionary reminder that no empire, regardless of how deeply it is woven into the cultural fabric, is entitled to a future. In the world of retail, past glory is not a shield, it is often a trap. Kmart's tragedy was not that it failed to grow, but that it forgot how to evolve, trading its pioneering spirit for the hollow safety of a spreadsheet. When we look at the empty shelves of these once great stores, we aren't just looking at abandoned real estate. We are looking at a fragment of a lost America, a time when the local department store was a reliable anchor of the middle class, a place of shared experiences and predictable comforts. Kmart taught a nation how to shop, how to hunt for bargains, and how to build a lifestyle around the Blue Light Special. But as the world accelerated into the digital age, the brand that once moved with the speed of a police siren became a stationary target for its rivals. As the final red signs come down and the last of the fluorescent lights fade to black, we are left with a simple, haunting truth. A brand lives in the hearts of its customers, but it dies in the silence of their absence. Kmart's story ends not with a bang, but with the quiet turning of a key in a dark room. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise and fall of an American icon. If you remember the thrill of a Blue Light Special or have your own memories of shopping under the big red K, please share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue to explore the vanished empires and forgotten stories of the American landscape. The blue light may be out, but the history remains.